John 1:30. Hic est de quo dixi post me venet, vir qui ante me factus est, quia prior me erat. This is he concerning or about whom I said, let me get a direct quotation here, after me comes a man who was before me, since he was earlier or before me. That's the end of our quotation. First thing to note here is that this, again, just like we saw a few verses ago, closely repeats the text of John 1:15, and if you compare those verses, you'll see what I mean. Hic est, this is our near demonstrative, nominative masculine singular. Hic est, this is the guy, to be carefully distinguished, of course, from hic, the adverb meaning here, in this place. That's not what we have right now. We've got the demonstrative. This person, this man, is he, we have to supply in English, concerning whom, about whom, and you'll recognize our ablative singular masculine of the relative pronoun, qui, quae, quod, about whom I spoke, about whom I said, and then here's the quotation, post me venet. One of the things I want to point out here about venet is that we've got to be careful to distinguish it from venet. If you're not in a situation in your Latin learning where you can listen to someone actually pronouncing the language, you will unfortunately miss out on some helpful data like this. For instance, how do you distinguish third person singular, present active indicative, venet, from third person singular, perfect active indicative? The forms are actually identical as they're written in most modern editions, but actually these words were pronounced differently, and this was an aid in distinguishing them in actual Latin speech, in Latin conversation among the Romans, and in later periods. So you can hear that difference, venet in the perfect, from the perfect stem veni, and venet, that's a short e, in the present tense. Now, what are these marks that you've seen me use a number of times, these long marks as over the E here? These are called macrons. Macron is from Greek, and it just means a long mark, showing that the quantity of this vowel is long. And we'll talk at a future time about the length of syllables and vowels. There's a lot to say there. But for now, we can just suffice to note that some textbooks, for instance, if you learn on Wheelock, or on Orberg's Lingua Latina, or one of those books, often those macrons are printed to help you in learning correct pronunciation. And they're also useful in the learning of prosody, that is, in the learning of how meter works in Latin. But often they're not printed in modern text. So how are you going to distinguish between venet and venet if, as here, the macrons aren't written? Well, of course, the answer is you distinguish based on context. In the case of the Vulgate, you have an additional tool, which is you can look at the original Greek text of the New Testament, because we know our Latin translators tried very hard to get quite close to the text of the Greek New Testament. So you can compare with what we find in Greek. And sure enough, that will tell you that we have venet and not venet. Vir qui ante me factus est, this of course is borrowed from John 1:15 as well. Quia, because. How else can we say because in Latin? We can say quod. And often also you'll see quoniam. These can be substituted for one another in most cases in the Vulgate. He was before me because or since prior me erat. He was earlier than me. And here we've got our ablative of comparison. So me, this is a long syllable here. Me is actually long there. He was earlier than me.